Sofici here. Thank you so much for joining us for today's short video presentation about online in Europe. To help me talk through this topic today, I'm joined by my colleague and online marketing manager, Alex Webb. Thanks for joining us, Alex.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So to start today, we thought it would be a good idea to give you all an idea as to the online environment in Europe in general first. And it's no secret that Europe is a highly connected and developed market with more cell phone connections than people. And with 84% of the population considered internet users, this is a great bit of news to exporters. If you're interested in exporting into Europe, you can be confident in thinking that the grand majority of the people your business plans on interacting with or trying to reach, so prospective partners, distributors, customers, are all online, and a ton of them are considered active social media users. Also, keep in mind that this is a snapshot taken of Europe back in January, so before COVID-19 happened, and the rise of connectivity from that as well. One thing about Europe that you cannot ignore is the prominence of e-commerce, with about 8 to 10 EU internet users searching online for goods and services. You need to have a really great local website to capture the audience and encourage the call to action. In terms of numbers, it's no surprise that the UK leads the way in e-commerce revenue, and the sheer number of online shoppers last year, with Italy, France and Spain trailing behind. But keep in mind that all of Western Europe contained 83% of Europe's online shoppers. The biggest growth, however, can be found in the eastern part of Europe. The e-commerce markets in Romania and Bulgaria both increased by 30% last year, which is the highest growth number in all of Europe. These are, however, also the two countries with the lowest share of online shoppers, respectively 31 and 29%. Spain also shows a nice market development with a 29% increase last year. The lowest growth can be found in Belgium, 7%, Ireland also 7%, and Austria at 4%. The e-commerce region report also analysed the popularity of national and foreign online stores among shoppers. In the Netherlands, consumers really prefer shopping at domestic websites at 95%, a trend that's also similar to Poland at 94%, and in the small countries of Malta and Cyprus, online shoppers mostly shop at foreign e-commerce websites, respectively at 96 and 95%. Keep in mind that online is for everyone, not just B2C companies. Sometimes hard to get reliable and consistent information on B2B sales, but the trend here is pretty clear. Online is growing sharply, and for the B2B sector, a growing number of European companies are now selling online. There was a study done at the start of 2020 of about 150 European manufacturers in the automotive, aerospace, marine, industrial equipment, process automation, healthcare, and food and beverage industries. It found that 77% have some type of online selling platform, and that most that don't are accelerating plans to launch a B2B e-commerce website. The types of online sales channels used by European manufacturers varies quite a bit. For example, 52% of manufacturers have an e-commerce site, but only 37% have a login portal, with only 25% selling on B2B marketplaces such as Amazon Business. It's not a webinar about Europe without at least mentioning the EU. No longer counting the UK, it's still a huge economy with 27 countries and over $15.6 trillion in combined GDP. Although smaller than the US economy, it does have a large internet space, with 86% of the population being online and 69% of them shopping regularly. Now, we would like to take a deeper dive into the three largest economies in Europe, starting with Germany.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex. So Germany really is a global power by any standards. It's Europe's largest population at 83 million, which is equivalent to a quarter of the US population. Or put in another way, the three largest states in the US. So it's like combining California, Texas, and Florida. In terms of GDP, Germany is also Europe's largest market, with about $1 trillion above number 2. It's the fourth largest economy in the world, ranked by GDP as well. And if you put that into perspective, this is equivalent to 3 times the size the whole of the Russian Federation, or about 1.5 the size of India. Finally, Germany really is a manufacturing powerhouse, and you can see this by the positive trade balance year after year. In 2009, German exports were 1.3 trillion, and this compares to about 490 billion in the UK, for example. In other words, Germany exported more than 2.5 times the size of the UK. Germany has the largest internet population in Europe at 75 million. But if we look at the German language internet sites that are frequently accessed by other countries, we get a much bigger sphere. German websites extend into other countries where many people speak German as a first or second language. Countries like Austria to Poland to the Czech Republic. And we reckon that this sphere of influence extends your German website to about 100 million people instead of just the 75 million within Germany. In terms of social media, over 85% of all Germans are online, but only half of those are on social media. Generally, social media usage is lower than most of the EU countries, and Germany has been really cautious to adopt social media platforms. But it is growing consistently, and it should be part of any exporter's online marketing strategy. So in terms of platforms, Facebook is still the #1 by a long reach. So 33% of all Germans use Facebook at least once per week. And actually the majority of them go on Facebook on a daily basis. So whenever we are taking a look at social media for Germany, we always think about using Facebook. There are also some really big differences when you want to reach Germans compared to the US or the UK. For example, Twitter is not a strong platform in Germany. Maybe because the number of characters compared to the length of German words, but I think it's also because Germans don't consider it serious enough. They actually consider Twitter to be pretty trivial. Germans like quite a lot of content, not something short and snappy, which is what Twitter does. They actually like something that has a lot more substance. There's also a platform in Germany called Zing. It's a little like LinkedIn, but specific to Germany. So that's another platform that B2B businesses can consider. And I also wanted to just quickly highlight some of the major characteristics of the German online behavior. German businesses and consumers tend to be very cautious and discreet online. They don't like to share personal information. So GDPR compliancy, which is something that we'll get into later, is extremely important for Germans. But watch out, because also Germans love to leave reviews. So whether they had a terrific experience with you or an atrocious one, they will probably leave an online review. So make sure to be ready to respond to those reviews accordingly as they come. And keep in mind that German is one of the most spoken languages on the internet, and Germans can find almost everything that they need in their mother tongue. They don't have much of an incentive to search in English, although they speak English most of the time. So when they do search for things in English, they usually do sort of find very specific information, or because they're very persistent in finding or searching for a niche product. However, these are just the exceptions. Most Germans will search in German. And if you only have a US or a UK website, your website will not pop up in their search results, so you'll pretty much remain invisible to them. And you have to be really careful about finding the correct keywords for your German website. This is essential for search engine optimization in general, but it's especially important in German, in part because Germans love to invent words. This means that oftentimes there's a number of ways as to how to translate a product name, because Germans love creating new words by combining existing ones. So that's why keyword research is so important when building sites in German. And I include an example here of a really long compound word in German as a funny little example. So translators can suggest something similar to describe your product or your service, but it's important to verify that that's actually what people are searching for when trying to search for that specific product. So when we're doing a German site for our clients, we look at the translated text and make sure that the words are actually really optimized. Finally, I would like to say that Germans love strong content, as I mentioned, why they don't like Twitter. So don't be afraid to add text and explanations. Your German prospects will definitely check it out, and they'll read it. So don't shy away from long product descriptions or PDFs and that sort of thing. And I think that brings us to our second country, the UK.
Thanks, Samantha. The UK is made up of 4 countries: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. But the UK is also very London-centric. In fact, London and its surrounding areas account for about 30% of the entire UK population, where there are 66 million inhabitants, so the third largest in the EU after Germany and France. But the UK punches way above its weight because of the English language, our happiest export over the last few hundred years. The little table here on the right gives you an idea of how many people in the world speak English as a first, second, or even third language, which amounts to over 2.29 billion people. So what does the UK look like online? On average, the internet penetration rate in the EU is about 90%. In the UK, it's 95%. We also have a high penetration rate of social media, with 2 out of 3 of the population actively using social media on a very regular basis. So you can see the UK is a very plugged in place. Interestingly, the number of active social media users is still growing quite well at about 3% every year. That means that an additional 1.2 million joined social media for the first time during 2019. And again, keep in mind that this was before the pandemic, so the numbers are more likely to be more than this than what we see here. The UK is also the undeniable European leader in time spent on the internet as well, at nearly 6 hours a day, of which an average of nearly 2 hours a day on social media. That is about double the EU average. So clearly, us Brits are all online for a lot of time searching and chatting. But we're also buying. In fact, we Brits are really a nation of shopkeepers, and the UK boasts the highest e-commerce penetration rate in the world. Nearly 80% of us Brits, all 66 million of us, bought something online within the last month. And in fact, nearly 90% of us visited an online retail store. For comparison, in the USA, the figure is lower at about 69%. And we didn't just shop for trinkets either. We spent an average of over $2,000 per person. That is for B2C e-commerce, so consumers. But for B2B, the e-commerce figures are harder to pin down exactly, as they get blurred between electronic data transmission and automatic invoicing. But people seem to all agree that the B2B side is about double the value of B2C. And there are a lot of studies showing that well over 2 out of 3 British companies are active online.
Wow, interesting. Thanks, Alex. And now that brings us to our third market, so France. Now, the French definitely think highly of their place in the world, and they have some reason to. In Europe, they tend to play second fiddle to Germany, especially as the UK is now out of the EU. So, for example, they are the second largest population with 67 million, and there are another 7 to 8 million other native French speakers in Europe, giving your French localized website a sphere of influence of about 74 million people. What's also really interesting about France and French websites is that they can kind of act as a gateway to much of the Mediterranean, as well as North and West Africa. In terms of social media, 60% of the total population are active social media users, which equals about 39 million people. And it keeps on growing. Since January of 2019, the user base grew by about 5.6%. And the French absolutely love YouTube. It is by far the biggest internet platform and the one that's used the most. So it's no surprise that 86% of internet users say that every month they watch online videos. And while Facebook is the largest social media platform, all the messaging platforms perform really well in France. So things like Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. But out of all of the top social media platforms, Instagram grew by the most, with it seeing about 6.5% growth last year, compared to Facebook and LinkedIn that have remained unchanged, and Twitter and Snapchat grew by less than 5%. Then taking a look at e-commerce, it's smaller than the UK numbers, with spending at about half. So 1,000 versus 2,000 in the UK, but it's growing at a double-digit rate. It started off pretty slow, but it's catching up fast, with 73% of internet users saying that they purchased a product online. And what's interesting about France is that there are a lot of local champions and a lot of little local marketplaces like Uboncoin and C Discount. Pardon my not so much French, and others that US exporters should consider when selling into the market via e-commerce. And then just taking a look at great French websites. So great French websites should absolutely be in French with proper keyword research for the local search engine. So really make sure, just like in Germany, in France, make sure to do proper keyword research for your localized French websites. Make sure to use YouTube. Like I mentioned, French people love YouTube. So even if it's just like a product demo or showing your factory, there are so many things that you can do with video with just a cell phone. So make sure to take advantage of that, and you can reach more people in France. Make sure to use French references. So if you can use pictures that will be more relatable to the French people, any sort of cultural aspect that you can kind of embed into your localized website, that will always be helpful. And make sure to have a strong social media presence. Even though social media is continuing to grow and more people are using social media, it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. So having a really great social media presence will just create that trust and credibility with your brand in the French market. So to have a great French website, make sure to surround it by a really phenomenal communication policy on these social media sites. And that brings me to website localization. So all of this is what we take into consideration when localizing websites for the European market. So in order to reach, connect, and communicate with people in Europe, you need to localize your website. As you saw in the previous slides, people in France interact differently with the web than people in Germany. So each buyer persona will more than likely interact differently with you. So we've been talking about website localization and social media, but for the sake of this specific video, your online presence absolutely has to be localized to do business really well in Europe. Between the language preferences, cultural differences, and regulatory compliance, which we'll get into a second, you need to localize your website, especially because you need to help search engines find you. You need to make it as easy as possible for Google to recognize that your website is dedicated to that specific market. And we'll also get into that in a second. So with that, I'll pass back to Alex to kind of take a little deeper dive into some aspects of website localization for Europe.
Thanks, Samantha. So one part of localization are domain names. Each country has their own localized domain name, like .co.uk for the UK, .fr for France, .de for Germany, for example. But what's nice about domain names in Europe is that they are not very restricted. So like other places, they usually don't require a passport number or local address. They're also not very expensive, unlike other domain names, like, for example, .ae or .sa for the UAE or Saudi Arabia markets. A question that we get pretty often from companies is, what about the .eu? So .eu is a regional domain name, much like .lat for Latin America. What's nice about the .eu is that people do recognize the domain name. However, what's important to keep in mind is that Google takes .eu very literally, so it will only be relevant for European Union countries and not all European countries. If you're interested in purchasing a .eu or .lat, remember that GoDaddy doesn't sell regional domain names, so you'll have to use another provider like EuroDNS or Nexus. One last thing about domain names: when choosing whether to go the .eu route or something more specific, make sure to take into consideration what your goals are for the region. It's like a laser approach versus a shotgun. Country-specific domain names will be much more precise, and a .eu will be more broad, so might not be as effective. Another really vital part of any online tool in Europe is the need to conform to GDPR. In other words, General Data Protection Regulation. This came into effect in May 2018, and it is enforced. Maybe even more importantly, European consumers and businesses expect you to be compliant. Not complying with GDPR is really not an image you want for your brand. It implies you do not treat your client data with respect and safely as well. So do make sure you are GDPR compliant. At its simplest, GDPR applies to processing of personal data of EU data subjects by any company inside or outside of the EU that is offering goods or services to EU citizens. This means that if you are a US company that has European clients or distributors, it is actually illegal for you to transfer data without being GDPR compliant. So if there is anything to take away from this section of the presentation, it is that if you are doing business in Europe through your US website, you have to make sure it's GDPR compliant, which can be annoying, I understand, and pretty cumbersome as well. The easiest and safest way to do business online in Europe and be GDPR compliant is by having a localized website dedicated to your specific market. So in terms of online compliance, there are a couple of must-haves for your website to be compliant with GDPR, such as a clear and readable cookie policy. And that goes together with a clear opt-in policy. So users have to consciously opt in and say yes to the use of your website cookies. The same goes for privacy policies, obviously all in the local language. Germany even goes one step further and asks for impressum, which basically means authorship and signals who owns the websites. So you can see that data compliance is not too simple in Europe and that you have to get it right. But the good news is that GDPR applies to all of the EU, so 27 countries covered with one set of rules. I know we always talk about Google and search engine optimization, but it is really worth mentioning that Google has at least a 90% market share across all of Europe. Here you can see Germany, Hungary, the UK, Netherlands and Greece. No matter which search engine or where you are, it is localized and searcher centric. But before you get started designing and launching your international marketing, there's one more crucial step. Make sure you do your keyword research. And this is vital for search engine advertising. You need to make sure you're using the exact language your target audience is using in their search if you want to rank high and be competitive. But this is also paramount for the content you create. And with content, I also include social media posts. That short snippet of text you include is all the audience has to make the decision, maybe even unconsciously, or on whether they'll engage or not. By creating a native-like experience, you can build trust, you can increase engagement and boost your brand, as the user won't think about your post as spam or as a sponsored ad, because you're creating a relevant, genuine and helpful local user experience. So in this example, we have a common word, so train, translated into Portuguese. As you can see by our keyword research, if you're a company that sells parts or trinkets for trains and you are trying to enter the Portugal market, you have to make sure you use the word comboio, because 98% of the people in Portugal who search for train use that term. So if instead you're using trem, you might as well be invisible to the Portugal market. So in line with buyer personas across Europe are going to be different. Even if you're doing similar marketing campaigns across markets, nonetheless, you do need to tweak them a little bit to the appropriate audience. What we found here is that the campaign in Germany was a lot larger than the UK. In Germany, Easter is a really big deal. So we dedicated a lot more time and resources to that campaign compared to the UK, and we got really good results out of it.
So if you're interested in having a localized website in Europe, if all of this seems a little bit overwhelming to do it yourself, we are happy to say that we have these really phenomenal online global programs for your top target markets, including all of Europe, but also countries in Asia, Africa, the US, you name it, we've done it. So just keep in mind that we do have programs that, depending on your goals, we can tip and tailor your website and your online marketing accordingly. So if you're a B2B company and you're looking to recruit distributors or support the distributors that you already have in the market, we can do that. If you want to increase your trust and credibility, if you want to increase your sales, if you want to increase your reach, we can customize your websites so that you can reach those specific goals. Real quickly, just to touch upon the programs, we specialize in two things specifically: website localization and international online marketing. So we have programs for localized websites that are made for informational purposes or to connect to distributors. We can also make websites that are e-commerce enabled for each specific market. So if you are interested in learning more about website localization or international online marketing, so search engine marketing, social media marketing, reporting and analytics, even things like email marketing, content marketing, video marketing, we can help you there in your international markets. So please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. We're always here and we're happy to help. So please reach out, send an email, book a meeting. We're here and ready to help you go global and help you grow your export sales, brand, and business. So thank you so much for joining us today in this webinar or this rather short video. And we're looking forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks, everyone. Bye.